We now present For the Record.
Just ahead, an abortion battle hits the courts in a widely watched first step.
If there are two statutes that are fundamentally in conflict, those statutes can't both exist.
Plus, as protests heat up on UW's campus, why expulsion is at the center of a free speech debate.
If this student can be expelled, then the students who've organized this protest could be expelled.
And later, continuing our coverage of a public defender crisis.
You have just one vacancy in your office of just a couple of people, and that is a significant amount of your workload that is missing, and a backlog that is being created in the meantime.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Naomi Coles. This week marks a big first step for a lawsuit that seeks ultimately to re-legalize some abortions in Wisconsin, and that's after the repeal of Roe v. Wade effectively reinstated a 174-year-old state ban. Now, it's led by the Department of Justice, with attorneys arguing for the first time in court this week. That's a critical first step just to get past the first hurdle of whether the suit should be dismissed. Dismissal is the position of Sheboygan District Attorney Joel Ermansky. He's Republican. He did decline to join the show today, but sent a statement reading in part, quote, "It is an issue for the legislature and the governor to resolve. As things currently stand, I believe the statute at issue remains on the books and can be enforced." Now, pushing the lawsuit forward, Democratic Attorney General Josh Kaul, who joins me now. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Let's just start with the first steps. When do we expect Dane County Judge Diane Shipler to make a decision?
Ultimately, it's up to the judge how long it takes to issue a decision on the motion to dismiss. That can range pretty widely, but I think one of the points made at the argument is that we need to get resolution on this issue, because right now Wisconsinites have an uncertainty as to what the state of the law even is. And if you're a doctor who needs to provide emergency medical care, that's not the kind of situation you want to have. It's certainly not the kind of situation we want to have for patients in Wisconsin. And so I expect that this case will move relatively quickly, but in the legal system, that still may mean that there are months ahead of us before we have resolution.
Right. And I mean, this question will get to the heart of the merits of the argument, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I guess more simply, do we feel like there is a reasonable expectation of dismissal here?
I feel very confident in our arguments, and we have argued that the judge should reject the motion to dismiss the case. Fundamentally, we have strong legal arguments here, which I know we'll talk about, but I believe that decisions about reproductive health care should be made by women, not by politicians, and we certainly shouldn't be governed by this 1849 law that's so extreme that it doesn't have any exceptions for rape or incest. So I'm confident in our legal arguments, but we're going to keep fighting to restore access to safe and legal abortion.
Now, if I were to summarize the opposing arguments here, quite frankly, it would be you're doing the wrong job. This is the job of the governor. It's the job of the legislature. They had the chance to overturn this ban. They didn't, and therefore it's not the place of the DOJ to do that. Your response?
Well, I think that fundamentally misunderstands what's at issue here. First of all, we have a situation where we have conflicting statutes. So we've got this 1849 ban that criminalizes almost all abortions in the state of Wisconsin. But then we also have a series of laws that were passed after Roe v. Wade was decided that regulate lawful abortion. And it can't be both legal and illegal at the same time to have certain abortions performed in Wisconsin. Doctors need to have clarity on that, and we've argued that the more recent laws are the ones that control. That's what legal doctrine says. In addition to that, we're in a very unusual position here where we had a statute that was considered unenforceable and unconstitutional for decades, that even before then was very rarely enforced. And now all of a sudden, to spring it on the people of Wisconsin when legislators thought the issue was settled, that's inconsistent with our basic democratic principles. And then last, but certainly not least, this is about fundamental rights for Wisconsinites. This is about who controls fundamental decisions in people's lives. So this is absolutely a place that I think the courts should be involved.
But can we drill into the details a little bit more? Because as I referenced, you say this is conflicting laws. We have prior to Roe v. Wade, we had a 20-week ban. Now it's an all-over ban. But if the argument here is, okay, well, the legislature is aware we have conflicting laws and they're okay with it and they've put that in place, I mean, how does that work with the DOJ, again, if this is a legislative job?
Yeah, there's a legal doctrine that determines when laws are considered to be repealed by implication, when there's an implied repeal. First, there's a principle that if there are two statutes that are fundamentally in conflict, those statutes can't both exist and the older one goes away. Here we've got that issue. The other thing is, when there's comprehensive regulation of a topic, that's considered to supersede an old general regulation. And that's exactly what we have here. There are very specific rules about when abortions can happen, how those abortions can happen legally. Those rules are inconsistent with the prior law. And again, that has left us without clarity as to what the law is in Wisconsin. So we've asked for clarification here, and it's my belief that that clarification will lead to the 1849 law being found unenforceable.
Can you point to other instances, perhaps, where the DOJ got involved in when there's a confliction of law, where there's two competing things?
This would be a rare circumstance. There certainly are other cases where there have been laws in conflict and implied repeals have been found, but these are unprecedented circumstances. We have what is really unprecedented, which is a right that was granted to people across the country that after almost 5 decades was all of a sudden taken away. And so we are in novel territory on a number of issues here, but that's because of the Supreme Court's decision to take a right away from women across the country to make fundamental decisions about their futures.
This case has obviously got a lot of national attention. Just as our station was a media coordinator, and we heard from both local, regional, and national outlets in terms of the attention and the interest on this case. Do you see yourself, and you touched on this a second in your last answer, but do you see yourself as kind of leading this a national example to other states who might be in similar positions of how to overturn this?
You know, the eyes of the nation are always on Wisconsin.
That is
we
true.
have critical elections here, and we're often the state that is the tipping point. So I do think that people around the country are going to be looking at what happens here. If you look at recent election results, whether it was the November election or the recent Supreme Court election, it's clear that voters in the state support access to safe and legal abortion. And I think we're going to see changes made both through our lawsuit and I think potentially legislatively in the future that recognize where voters stand and that it's not where we are right now in Wisconsin, which is a ban that allows for abortions only in extremely limited circumstances, which the legislature has chosen to keep in place, even though the vast majority of Wisconsinites think that there should be changes made to that law.
Thanks so much for coming on, sharing your thoughts on the arguments. I'm sure you will be back in months to come discussing the same thing.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. All right. Right after the break, UW-Madison campus this week embroiled in protest and controversy after students demand expulsion for a student accused in a racist rant.